Hi, today we're going to do a lesson on negative exponents and a couple different rules that I want you to learn here that will go along with that. First of all, a negative exponent represents repeated division, and I'll show you how that works here in a little bit. But repeated division, if you have a positive exponent like 2 to the third power, it means you're multiplying the factor of 2 together 3 times. But if you have 2 to the negative third, that negative on your exponent tells you to divide by 2 3 times. So divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Now when we're dividing something by 2, we represent that as multiplying by a half. So 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 would equal 1/8. So a lot of times students will say, I'll ask them, what does the negative exponent do to the answer? And they'll tell me it makes it a fraction. And sometimes when you start with a whole number base, that is what happens. It makes it a fraction. The other thing that we're wanting to learn in this lesson is if you take something to the 0 power, it equals 1. And that's true with any base, no matter what the base is. If you take it to the 0 power, the answer is going to be 1. So the next thing I want to do is talk a little bit and show you a pattern of why these exponent rules work. Remember, the rules are just to make things easier for you to understand and to do the math quicker. So we're going to follow the exponent rules and look at a pattern to understand them. So if we take something that we don't know, like 2 to the third power, we understand that that means that we're multiplying 2 together 3 times. And the product of those 3 factors is 8. Okay, so let's say we reduce the exponent by 1. That means we have 2 factors of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. And 2 to the first power means that there's 1 factor of 2, so the answer is 2. Now, each time I'm taking 1 away from the exponent. So if I do follow with this same pattern, I would have 2 to the 0. Now let's look at the results over here, the product of these x powers. So 8 divided by 2 would give me 4, and 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So each time I have one less factor of 2, I'm dividing by 2. So let's divide by 2 again. What's 2 divided by 2? Well, the answer is 1. And this happens every time that we look at the pattern with different bases, that when you take a number and you divide it by itself, you're going to get 1. So any number to the 0 power equals 1. That's one of the rules we were trying to learn. Now the other new part in 8th grade is working with negative exponents. And so we would reduce the exponent by 1, so take 1 away, so we're at negative 1. Well, let's follow our pattern over here. What's 1 divided by 2? Well, that is a half. So we take half of something by multiplying by the factor of 1/2. So put 1 over 2 is your answer. Then if you take half of a half, if you think about how that would work, half of a half equals 1/4. 2 times 2 on the bottom. So 2 to the negative second means that you're dividing by 2 twice. And the way we show division by 2 twice is to take half of it twice. So 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. And we'll do this one more time to just continue the pattern here. 2 to the negative third equals 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, which equals 1 to the 8th. So just think of a negative exponent as meaning repeated division. Well, let's look at a few examples where we want to simplify. So we're going to simplify, and we never want to leave a negative in the exponent for a variable. So let's first talk about if the base is a number. So let's say we have 5 to the negative 3. If that's the case, then that means we're going to divide by 5 3 times, which we talked about making that 1/5 times 1/5 times 1/5. Which equals 1 over 125. Another way to do the same problem is as soon as you see the negative exponent, rewrite that as the reciprocal for the base. So 1 over 5 to the third. So because there's 3 factors of 5 down here, so some people would prefer just to go ahead and flip this to the denominator and drop the negative sign. And that also equals 1 over 125. They both mean the same thing, whether you're multiplying by a fifth 3 times or taking 1 divided by 5/3. Okay, another example here, maybe we have a number like negative 7, x to the 0 power. And so this means negative 7 is being multiplied by x to the 0 power. Well, if we look back at our pattern, we just learned that any number to the 0 power is going to give me 1. So it doesn't matter what this variable is equal to, it's to the 0 power, so it equals 1. So negative 7 times 1, the answer is negative 7. Let's take a look at it. One more example like this. Example 3. Let's say we have the opposite of 5x to the 0 power. Well, the base is 5 and an x. But again, it doesn't really matter what this multiplies to equal. It's still all going to be the 0 power. What's different here is the negative sign is outside the parentheses. So it's negative 1 times 1, because any base to the 0 power equals 1. And negative 1 times 1 would equal negative 1. Okay, let's take a look at some more examples. Maybe we're using our exponent rules and we have, and we're asked to simplify still, 4x to the 5th times 5x to the negative 7th. Okay, so this is a monomial times another monomial. 4 times 5. Remember, you can regroup these so that you can multiply the coefficients together. And you have x to the 5th and x to the negative 7th. So 4 times 5 is 20. And then here, when you add the exponents, you notice one's negative, so you have negative 2 there as your exponent. And what I said earlier is you don't want to leave your answer with variables with negative exponents. So you would rewrite this as 20 over x squared. And that's the final answer for that problem. Okay, and I want to do one where you have to evaluate. So example 4, the directions will be just a little bit different. It's going to be evaluate when x equals negative 2. So maybe we have 7x to the negative 3. Okay, so 7's being multiplied by x to the negative 3rd. So I can go ahead and simplify this first and move the x to the denominator, so 7 over x to the 3rd. X is a negative 2, so I want to use substitution and replace the x with a negative 2. This tells me that there's 3 factors of negative 2 in the denominator. Anytime you have an odd number or an odd exponent to a negative base, your answer is going to be negative. So this is negative 8. And a lot of times what we do with this negative sign, if it's in the denominator, we move it in front of the fraction or put it with the numerator, so we would read this negative 7/8. Okay? So just know that when you see a negative exponent, you're not going to leave it. You're going to get rid of it. You can get rid of it by moving it to the denominator if it's in the numerator. And vice versa. If you had 5 over x to the negative 2nd, you could rewrite this as 5x squared. You could move that term to the numerator because you would be able to divide and multiply by the reciprocal, so it would become 5x squared. So, anyways, when you're substituting, make sure you use parentheses so that you know that it's the negative sign also to the 3rd power. And go ahead and simplify your answer as much as possible. Okay, thank you, and continue to work and do your best.